Good morning, Carrie. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am hanging in there. I'm doing really well, I guess. Had an enjoyable, pretty much enjoyable week. We got some rain, you know.
Yes, the rain was amazing.
I know it rained till late the other night. I guess that was
Yeah,
what, Monday night it rained.
Monday night. Yeah, it rained a lot Monday night.
Still thinking about the rain through the week. It's just, watching away the sins of all these bad decisions people have been making. How about that?
Right?
And my question to you is, did you know that this is our 30th episode?
Yay, our 30th
Our
episode.
30th episode. So we've talked about it a
Wow.
lot. We kind of changed a little bit and played with the format. We've been having a lot of fun. And unfortunately, we don't have Nelson here, who's been on regular, but he's been out sick for 2 weeks. So y'all, it's not that we kicked him to the curb. We actually have just been waiting for him to feel better, I think. Did you
Yeah,
kick him to the curb?
absolutely not. I miss Nelson.
I do too. I miss his little wit and his crazy little outfits and that hair.
I think he'll be back soon.
Hopefully so. Hopefully he'll wrap up being sick. And, it's really inconvenient of him to be sick when we want to record and stuff. But we kind of settled up on a topic of you've got this contract on this new home, and now what? And now thinking about this and really kind of setting us up to talk about this on this episode, we really have to think about it, I think, from the buyer's standpoint. I think that's really going to be the best way to do it. I, but if you're not a buyer and you're a seller, you really do need to know the hurdles that the buyer's going to jump through and the things that they're going to actually have to do, because it's 50% seller, 50% buyer. You got to get to the closing table, which is the end goal. Now, that doesn't mean that you're each going to have 50% of the work. Seller's always going to say, oh my gosh, I've got so much to move. I have to do so much more. But the seller also has to remember that the buyer has to move in.
Right.
So, you can't really say who's doing the most, but we're going to talk about it from a buyer's perspective as far as what all they've got to do. And it'll kind of clue in some sellers out there so they know what all's going on. The important thing to remember during all of this, and I think that's going to save some of the questions from our viewers, is that the sales contract that you are doing is a blueprint for the agreement that is between the buyer and the seller. So everything that you're going to need, individual questions pertaining to your situation, is going to be found inside your sales contract. Now, Carrie and I are both in Texas. Doesn't mean we're always going to be. Maybe New Mexico, maybe in addition, Colorado. Who knows what the future
Colorado. Yeah.
holds? But at the same time, it is important that we start thinking about getting a file from contract to close. And that's the step, quite frankly, that most agents aren't the best with. And I've had the pleasure of teaching agents all over the nation. I have taught a whole lot here in our great state of Texas. And this is the section they need the most help with. So the fact that you're cluing into this video and are watching it, or if you're watching us live, I think this is really going to help you in making sure that you are getting to the closing table correctly. Right off the bat, nothing that we talk about should be constituted as kind of like legal advice. This format. I don't represent you at this time. I don't know about Carrie, but I don't represent you. But with that said, there are a lot of deadlines that we're going to talk about, and things that is just going to come up in conversation, because I know Carrie, and those are all decided during the contract phase. So you're going to have to refer back again to your own executed real estate contract in Texas to get these answers. But we're going to take it from the period that you have an executed contract. And one deadline is always going to remain the same when it comes to real estate. And that one date is going to be the title commitment date. After that, everything else is up in the air. But the title commitment date is the date that the title company is charged with getting the title commitment to the buyer. And that is going to be 20 days from the date that the title company receives the contract or receipts the contract, if that makes better sense. But other than that, all the dates are kind of, we can flip them around and, look at this and look at that. There may be penalty dates or out dates that you have to really stick with. If this happens, then you have to consider this. But for the most part, the one that everybody's going to have to be considering is 20 days after the title receives the contract. Make sense? Pretty easy?
20 days.
20 days, yeah. But let's say you have that executed contract. You received it back from your agent and it's there. The first and foremost thing that you're probably going to have to think about is the option period. And that is if you chose to purchase an option period. Now, my little instructor brain has popped on. It is never a good idea to purchase a piece of property where you are offered an option period for purchase, because you have to pay something for the option period, and not have it inspected. We're going to see a lot of things come about after people have bought without an option period and without doing inspections. So, highly recommend that everybody gets an option period. But Carrie, we got to start thinking about some of the things that we have to do during the option period. And a lot of people and a lot of agents, unlike Carrie, are going to tell you, we just have to look at the, inspections and negotiate repairs. That's all we have to think about. It's not all you have to think about. There's a lot that happens in a short or long period of time. So you have to really look at the number of days you're going to have in your option period. 3 days, you're going to be busted to get some things done. 5 days, it's still going to be tight. 7 to 10 days, it's going to be doable. But Carrie, what's one of the first things that someone is going to need to do during their option period?
Well, I mean, like you just mentioned, get that inspection. Get that inspection done and make sure that you have time to understand and digest the inspection report and decide what you want to negotiate on. If there are major repairs required, if there are minor repairs that you want to talk about, because all the repairs are going to be negotiable, and it just kind of depends on what situation you're in, what situation the seller's in. But you certainly want to get that inspection report done as soon as possible so you can talk with your agent about what you do want to try to negotiate and what you're okay with, fixing or living with.
Now, the inspection that Carrie is actually talking about is your general property insurance. The one that you're going to hire an inspector. They're going to come in and look at everything, and they are going to do a limited visual inspection. This is not putting the house up on, some surgical table. You're not inserting a hose. This is not any
No house
type of
surgery.
probe up in the anus or anything like that. This is just a limited visual inspection. But depending on the type of property that you're buying and where that property is, you're going to have other considerations like, is there well water? You're going to have the water tested. Are you on a septic tank? You're going to have that septic system tested, right? And
Right.
no matter where you are, depending on the status of plumbing, you might have to have a hydrostatic test done or
Ooh.
a camera test.
Yeah.
And, I like the camera over the hydrostatic, but that's just me. There's benefits to both if that's what you want to do. But you might also have to have an electrician come in or an HVAC or
Sometimes a
Carrie.
foundation person.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Or Carrie's favorite is
Yeah.
have your foundation inspected by a structural engineer, and you're going to have to pay for that consultation. Just beware. But that's not to kind of keep you from not having it done, right?
Right.
But there's in certain areas and certain size properties, you may want to have the trees inspected. You may want to have the grass inspected. You definitely want to have the roof inspected,
Oh,
most
yeah.
definitely, and looked at. And you're also going to want to look at the drainage situation. Is the neighbor dumping water onto your property? Are you dumping water onto the neighbor? Is there some liability there that you're going to inherit with where that water is flowing? So all of those things, are additional inspections that you have to do on top of that general property inspection that Carrie started us out with. But there's one more that is kind of major for a lot of people as far as inspections. And when we all set out to purchase a property, we're going to look at a lot of whether we're looking at new properties, it's not going to be an issue. But if we're looking at resale properties and we look at any property that was built prior to January 1st, 1978, way before I was born, kind of thing, there may be some lead tests that you want to have done. And you need to understand that you don't want to waive that right. And if you waive that right to do any of those tests during the contract period, you may want to go ahead and do them as well. And you may not have that out. I mean, you pretty much wouldn't have that out on the contract if there was an issue. But I'd still want to know.
Yeah. Always good to know if there's lead paint on a property.
Right. And one of the disclosures that we use with our clients is that general information about property insurance for a buyer and a seller. And we use it with our buyers for a specific reason because, and Carrie's going to talk about this a little bit, but it tells you that you need to get a clue report and you need to get that from the insurance company, right?
Yes. Yes. And that's another really important thing to get done during that option period, because the clue report can uncover things that sometimes don't come up during the inspection. And the clue report is going to give you information on any claims that have been filed on the property. And you can find out, based on, if you do find that claims were filed, you can find out if damage was repaired or how well it was repaired, and just kind of get some more information that way. And that's also going to kind of inform the insurability of the property.
Yeah, or if they got the money and they didn't do any repairs.
Right, which
So
happens.
that's a big thing too.
Yeah.
So it is a way to track it. But also during that option period, not only do you want that clue report, but you want to get a written quote of insurance
Right.
from your insurance company. Because what they're going to do with that clue report is they're going to match the buyer up with the property. And when you do that, it's going to interlay. So a buyer could have a whole lot of automobile claims or prior property claims, and they may say, we ain't covering you. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the property, it has to do with the buyer. So you
Right.
have to make sure that you get that taken care of during the option period, because there is no out for you in the contract that says, I can't get insurance. You need to figure that out during the option period,
Yeah.
because that
Figure
can
out
be
that.
embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if this is all too much for you to do, you do have an option. And Carrie's going to talk a little bit about extending the option period.
Yes, extending the option period. So that is an option. Option.
It is an option. You are right.
That's something that you can do if you're getting close to the end of the option period that you've purchased in the first place. You can talk to your agent about speaking to the sellers and trying to find out if you can pay an additional amount to get some more days added onto that option period.
Yeah.
I'll give you some more days, if you still need to negotiate repairs, if you still need to do more inspections, you still need to do more work on the insurance, that can give you a few more days sometimes if the seller's willing to go along with that. And a lot of times they will be, if you can get the agents working together for everybody's benefit.
Absolutely. And if your seller needs additional time to investigate the negotiations or the repairs, then they too can ask for an extension. In either case, You have to understand that the buyer has to pay something and an amount greater than $10 to extend. Each extension has to have at least $10. Now, I've heard attorneys say when you figure the amount that you're paying for the option and the number of days, if you divide the number of days into the amount, it's going to tell you a per day extension amount.
Mhm.
However, the Texas Realtors, which is our Realtor Association, has placed it on their blog, and I do not know if it's still there, but it has to be at least $10. You can have an issue in court that, and I'm not an attorney, but I've been told multiple times that you could have an issue in court if you put $0 on there for an option period extension. So you need to be aware of that, because you also need to be aware, and I think this is kind of understood, but it may not be. You have to extend the option period, and you have to pay for the extension prior to the expiration of your current option period. So
Right.
if your option period ends today at 5 p.m., you have to negotiate, sign, and pay by 5 p.m. today. So it's some critical timing that you really do have to be aware of. And that's why it's really important to have an agent who really knows what they're doing. It's not somebody who has the most slickest advertising, or you like the real estate company sign that's in the yard or something. It is all about the agent. And if people think otherwise, they're wrong. They're completely wrong. And we need to make sure that we understand that a successful transaction in real estate starts with the searching for a buyer, but it's all about the contract and getting the contract to closing. And a lot of people, it seems like a whole lot will just hire somebody instead of learning how to do it, but then they don't know the pitfalls to look for. So make sure that you understand and you know that your agent can really walk you through what happens in your particular transaction from contract to closing, is what we're just going to call it. But you can negotiate for any repairs or money in lieu of repairs, right?
Right.
And so Carrie might be talking with a client, and she may be representing a buyer, and instead of having the seller make those repairs, they are going to ask for a certain dollar amount. And there's benefits to that, and then there's not benefits to that. And the benefit is that the seller's not making those repairs and you're getting money. At the same time, they're not holding that money for you. You don't get that money. It's going to go into the loan, basically.
Right.
I think that is one of the things that people don't understand, is they're not getting that.
Yeah, because then you're kind of out of pocket for those repairs when you do move into the house and decide to do them yourself.
Right. And another consideration would be the type of loan you're getting, because each mortgage type that whether it's conventional, FHA, VA, regardless of whichever one, there's USDA as well. But you have to look at the limits that the seller can pay, because it's not just an unlimited amount there. So you
Right.
need to check with the mortgage person during this time period to really know, if you're going to do some money in lieu of repairs, how much that's going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But one of my favorite sections is the HOA documents and ordering the resale certificates and getting all those bylaws, covenants, and restrictions ordered. And typically, the title company orders that, don't they, Carrie?
Right, correct.
But it's important that we have our agent, as well as the buyer, read these documents. The buyer needs to know what they're buying. And they
Right.
need to know the restrictions in that neighborhood, any kind of covenants and any bylaws they're going to have to subscribe to.
Right. All those rules you get to follow when you buy a home in an HOA. Super
Yeah,
important.
it is. And a lot of those homeowners associations is what I call that's the HOA is the acronym, but homeowners associations have websites. So you can go Google them or Bing them or Duck, whatever it is, to go find the website. And they may have some of these documents up there that you can read in advance. And I highly think that you need to, because buyer beware in so many aspects that you need to be making an informed decision.
Right. Absolutely.
So, the survey, Carrie, that's my next favorite thing that we talk about during the beginning. And we usually look at that during the option period. And of course, the number of days that the survey is to be delivered is decided when the contract is written.
Yeah. So that can be negotiated. It's a negotiated number of days. So it just kind of depends on what the buyer and the seller want to do and what the lender's okay with. And it's also negotiable who's paying for the survey. Is the buyer
If
paying for it?
anyone, yeah.
Is the seller paying for it? Sometimes the seller even has a recent existing survey that's acceptable to the lender, and they can just submit that with a form, and that takes care of that whole process. But that one is really depends on the individual transaction because it can be so different.
Yeah. Excuse me. One of the things that I get asked the most is, do I really need a survey? And my response to that is always, have you ever rented a car? Because they're going to walk you around that car and you're going to mark any damage, and you really need to be
Right.
seeing what you're buying, right?
Absolutely. You have to make sure that the lot size is what you expect it to be. You just have to make sure, yeah, like you said, everything is what you're expecting it to be.
Yeah, make sure that there's no encumbrances that are going off the property that you're going to have to be responsible. The building set lines are all in there and
Yeah.
everything in there. But in Texas, we also have what is known as the T47, or the residential affidavit, which accompanies an existing survey.
Right.
And if you look at your contract, it's going to say if they've chosen the first option in our Texas real estate contract, it's going to say that the seller is going to deliver the survey and the residential affidavit within X number of days. So if they choose number one, then of course, always the seller is going to have to deliver both the survey and the residential affidavit. And it's not an affidavit until it's notarized.
Right.
So it in this document basically says that the survey is accurate. And so that contract's going to tell you how many days that the seller has to deliver that. And if they don't deliver that, depending on what the contract says, which currently in today's format, it says that if you choose option one and you agree to deliver both of those documents, and you don't within the number of days that you've agreed upon, then the seller gets to pay for a new survey. And that's a big buyer benefit, right? I've
Yeah.
won clients over that.
Right.
And so it's important to stay on top of this and hold your agent accountable to it. And you don't have to hold our agents accountable to it because they get it from me. And I'm like, you have to watch this and you have to stay on top of this. But it is something that is really important because even if you get the survey and you get the T47 and the survey isn't, as Carrie was saying, acceptable to either the title company or the buyer's lender, then one of the two parties, however it was agreed upon in the contract, has to order and pay for a new survey. So you also has to get that survey in by closing. So you want to stay on top of these things, and you want to make sure that these things are taken care of and receipted.
Right.
And I'm going to also want to advise people that if you're buying a home in a public improvement district, and if you don't know what a public improvement district is, Google or go do a YouTube search on some of the PIDs. It's a PID, because you are supposed to receive a disclosure, because on a PID you have an amount that is taxable that is paid through your property taxes for that property. And there are repercussions if you are buying in a PID and you do not know it and you have not received the disclosure at the time of contract. So if you are buying in a PID and you haven't received that, you may need to call an attorney. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
But there's also something called a MUD, which is a municipal utility district. And they also have a disclosure, and that is to be received at the time the offer is made on the property. So you need to make sure that you have both of those. And I think that's going to be critical to keeping you out of trouble. You want to also pull up the county appraisal district, right, Carrie?
Yes,
And look at
absolutely.
some of those numbers that you're going to be responsible for paying those property taxes.
Yeah, the county appraisal district will typically publish, what a property's assessed value is and what the taxes have looked like for the last few years. And that can be a wonderful source of information for a buyer as far as looking at the individual line items, figuring out if you're in a pit, if you're in a mud, and also just having a reasonable expectation of what you might need to pay in taxes if you live in that house.
Yeah, and they might want to look at the actual declarations or deductions that they receive, kind of
Mhm.
like, you're going to see some, if somebody is military and they have 100% disability, or it may be 90% and above, they're going to actually pay no property taxes. So you're going
Right.
to see a zeroed out bill a lot of the time. But if you need to look at those homestead exemptions and over 65 or over 80 different ones in there, because if you don't qualify for the same exemptions that you would be getting when you're going to purchase the property, the taxes are going to change.
Taxes are going to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some things you need to look at when you're looking at those numbers as well. Because homestead, you can pretty much get your homestead now after you've purchased the property, but the over 65, you need to be over 65, right? And I got a ways to go for that. So it's not just there for everybody over 65. Um, but when you're looking at some of those things, understand that and make yourself a note that the appraisal district may send you a questionnaire after they've received your property purchase into their records, and they're going to send you this nice little questionnaire, and they're going to ask you to fill it out. You don't have to fill it out, and I would implore you
Well,
not to fill it out. There's one main thing that they're going to ask on this, and it's the whole reason for the document.
yeah, they love this. They love to ask this question. How much did you pay for the house?
How much did you pay for the
Yeah.
house? And Texas is a non-disclosure state currently. Now, what that means is, or not, it's not non-disclosure state. It means that Texas, our government, cannot compel its residents to disclose how much they purchased a property for. Some of them are going to be in the MLS, and we need to tighten that down and make sure that they're not getting that information. But please understand, don't fill that little questionnaire out. Not a good thing, right?
Yeah,
But Carrie, you're gonna have to make somebody's gonna have to stay in touch with the lender, aren't they?
absolutely. Everyone needs to stay in touch with the lender.
Yeah, and what are some of the things they're gonna have to do with the lender?
Well, the lender's going to ask for a lot of paperwork. They're going to ask for employment verification. They're going to ask for verification of various assets that you have, because they're going to need to do all of their work that they need to do to qualify you for that loan and make sure that that loan closes correctly. So you need to be waiting for that lender to call and providing them with everything they ask for.
Right. You're going to have if you've used the third party financing addendum in our arsenal of forms, and you probably have if you're getting financed. You need to look at the number of days if you selected a number of days for your um, mortgage approval. That's basically what we're going to call it. And you need to make sure that the lender gets you your full approval within those number of days, or you don't have an out based upon mortgage financing.
Right.
That's going to be critical. But the lender's also going to be the one that's going to order the appraisal. And the appraisal is pretty important, isn't it, Carrie?
Yeah, the appraisal is incredibly important because you want that house to appraise for,
Ding, 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 ding.
right, at least what you're offering for it. That way your loan can cover what it needs to cover.
Yeah.
And That's also something that your agent can help with. Agents will typically prepare an appraisal packet to provide to the appraiser, kind of showing how they.
Not all, not all of them. Good ones like you do, yes. But there's a lot of agents that just do a quick CMA when they're, just pulling the price per square foot when they're looking at houses. They don't even do no appraisal packet.
Right. Well,
You do.
yes.
Let's be clear about you doing that because that's important.
Okay, yes. I love to make my appraisal packets. I love to help make the case to that appraiser that this house is priced at what it should be priced at.
And it's critical for a buyer. And a lot of,
It
historically in real estate education, they've thrown that onto the shoulders of the listing agent. But with the appraisal waivers, or that's what we call them, and I forget the name of the form off the top of my head. And if you're all in and it doesn't matter what the appraisal comes in because you've basically, said you're going to pay for whatever it is, then the listing agent doesn't care and they're not going to do it. So it's going to really be on the shoulders of the buyer's agent to work to get that appraisal packet done.
Right.
To be able to prove that. So it's, there's been a little bit of change in our, the way we do things, and it does matter. And if you're trying to do this transaction without an agent, this is not the video for you, because you've got to understand that a lot of this, you're not going to know how to do it. And really,
you won't have access to the data.
You won't have access to the data to get that. And the mortgage company is going to keep you away from the appraiser, just like they try to keep us with a limited viewpoint and a limited access to the appraiser, so that there's no anybody trying to influence a financial decision by the appraiser. So there's a lot that's going on already, and we're not even,
That's a lot.
We're not even close, right?
Right.
About a week out from closing, you're going to start talking about scheduling that closing. And please understand that our Texas real estate contracts are written to the aspect that closing is on or before a certain date. And if you miss that date, you're in default. The seller does not have to extend the closing at all. There is no thing in there. Should they? Will they? Those are all questions. But do they have to?
No, they don't have to.
No.
They are not required to.
Right? But you need to schedule that up front. What day, Carrie, do you like the most to schedule closings on?
I like to schedule them on a Tuesday.
Okay.
Because title companies are typically incredibly busy on Mondays, and don't like to wait till Thursday or Friday, because then, if something happens, it's the end of the week and you're looking at the weekend. So Tuesdays are absolutely my favorite day to schedule a closing on.
So that's a good day.
Yeah, Tuesday is a good day for a closing.
Yeah, middle of the week is pretty good for me. I try somewhere in there, but I do not like Friday closings.
No.
And everybody used to say, oh, well, let's do it on a Friday. No, I don't think so. But scheduling it up front is important so that you can make sure that you get the date and the time. So, Carrie, do you like morning closings or afternoon?
Morning, definitely morning.
Yeah, and I'm talking top of the morning.
Yeah. Like first thing when everybody wakes up.
Yeah, getting there and making sure that you have pretty much everything taken care of. And but before we even get to the closing, you're going to receive, hopefully, if you're financing your loan, you should be receiving a closing disclosure at least 3 days prior to closing.
Right.
And that closing disclosure must be given according to our federal lending rules to the buyer at least 3 business days prior to closing, and that will include Saturdays before they close the loan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important to know, because if you don't get that, and if they require you to sign something and get it back, you're throwing your closing date. And if you're set to close on the date on the contract, you want to make sure that you're not messing something up.
Right.
Now, the lender, as Carrie well knows, is responsible for any errors or miscalculations that they make on the closing disclosure, um, unless the increase is within the allowed 10% tolerance limit. And if, or in an area without a limit. So we've got a 10%
Mm.
tolerant limit a lot of the time. So, they're going to be responsible. So they're going to probably have estimated your numbers a little bit higher, just to kind of cushion it and make sure it's all going to be okay. But you're going to want to review that and want to know that, and you're going to want to talk to your lender. Carrie and I and your agent aren't your lender. There's that separation of church and state. There's that separation of finance and realtor.
Right.
And although I've done mortgage for a good decade, it is not something that you would see one person doing or shouldn't be doing on both sides of that fence. But is also what we used to use, which is the HUD-1. And the HUD-1 used to be the closing statement that we used for every transaction. And it is still around basically only for cash transactions, because the closing disclosure in its 4 or 5 page format, which we're going to discuss in a future video, but that actually is not going to be used for cash. It's going to be that HUD-1. And it'll be a simple 2-sheet. You can track the money and see buyer, seller side, and all of that.
Right.
But you're going to get that probably the day of closing. But when you start thinking about getting that money, that if you have any type of money that you have to bring to closing, you need to talk with your agent, you need to talk with your mortgage person, and you need to talk to the title company, because the title company dictates how they can receive that money.
Right.
It ain't going to be a personal check. And it's
No.
probably not going to be a cashier's check, is it?
No.
No. So how are you typically in today's environment going to have to get that money to the title company, Carrie?
It's typically going to be some kind of an electronic wire, um, which has a lot of security around it. Also important for everybody out there listening to us and watching us. When you receive those instructions, you do want to confirm them with the title company,
Absolutely.
just to make sure that it's not a random email from someone trying to scam you, because that does happen. So always, when you get that information, those instructions to wire that money over, pick up the phone, call your contact at the title company and say, hey, I just want to verify this with you, voice to voice.
Yeah, and don't use
Our
that
money's safe.
number. Don't use the number that comes with the wiring instructions. Use
Right.
the one that you already know.
Yeah. Use the one with the person you've already been talking to.
Yeah. Because if you haven't already, met them, talked to them, or set up the closing and stuff and gotten some confirmation and asked them about, hey, I got to pay this money, how can I get it to you? Because the underwriter at the title company is the one who's in charge of the rules of the title company on how they can receive that money. And that's really, really imperative, because there have been lawsuits over the fact that a buyer came in and didn't follow the title company's operating instructions and did not give them the money in the way, and they went back and sued the seller, because guess what, I showed up with the money and they wouldn't take it and in the contract the seller didn't have to actually continue with the purchase. They could release the buyer and take their earnest money. So
Oh,
there's some serious things that you have to really pay attention and follow the rules, right?
yeah.
But Carrie, I'm going to let you talk about the final walkthrough, because the final walkthrough is something that is really imperative that needs to be done, and there's some specific reasons why.
Yeah. So the final walkthrough, yeah, you're almost to closing, and this is going to be one of your last steps. You're going to go with your agent and you're going to walk through and probably around the house and There's a few things you want to look at. You want to make sure that if you have negotiated any repairs with the seller, that you've not only received receipts for professional completion of those repairs, but you also want to, for the ones that you can, go
Wait,
and visually look at them.
can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
You said professional completion. Tell us about professional completion.
Yeah. So if you negotiated with the seller that they're going to have certain repairs completed, um, they are required by the contract to have someone who's either professionally licensed to do those repairs, and that's going to be like in the case of an electrician or a plumber, a profession where you required to have a license to operate. Or if it's something that you don't necessarily need a license for, like say, drywall work or something like that, you still have to have a receipt from someone who's professionally engaged in the practice of doing that work. In other words, it can't typically be the seller just going in and making a repair. So you've already gotten those receipts. Yeah. Yeah. Robbie's pointing at me. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's incredibly correct. So okay, so you're there, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was, to me, that was very important, and you touched on it, and I wanted to highlight that, and you did it. That was perfect in my mind. So you've shown up, you're walking through the property, and you've got these receipts. So continue with the and before I interrupted you, I apologize.
So you've got your receipts. You're going to go in and visually verify everything. What you can verify. There are some repairs that you can't visually verify, and for that, you're going to rely on your receipts. But anything you can look at, you're going to want to look at. You also want to look around and make sure that the things that are supposed to still be in the house are still in the house. So things that are attached, like curtain rods. There's a whole list of the specific things in the contract that the seller is supposed to leave with the house. You want to make sure all those things are still there as expected. You also want to make sure that everything that's not supposed to be there has been removed. So did they leave trash in the house? Did they leave furniture in the house? Did they leave anything in the house that's not supposed to be there?
Now, hopefully, you've worked with somebody who's smart enough to know that the contract doesn't at all say you have to have it broom clean. It doesn't say anything about the condition of the property. So hopefully they've written that in on the condition of the property that is supposed to be left in.
Right.
Because there can be some huge issues if you've got somebody who's been a hoarder, somebody who just collects a whole lot of stuff, or decides they don't want it in the future.
Yeah.
And we've had people just forget to check the attic, and they've got all their Christmas decorations and everything that grandma and grandpa have left them. And
Hey, bonuses.
yeah, and then you either have to get them to come get that later on, or depending on the person, they keep it. But I've had clients that have called and said, "Hey, can you get a hold of the seller, because we bought this house and we've just gone up. It's a year later into the attic, and it's full." And I think they're going to want all these Christmas decorations and stuff. It's we're about to put out our Christmas tree. They're going to want this.
Yeah.
But that final walkthrough is the time to make sure that property is in the same condition that you saw it when you
Right.
were going and purchasing the property and doing all your inspections and stuff. In the same condition or better. And hopefully, if you've asked for it to be cleaned, that it has been cleaned and those repairs have been done. If not, don't close.
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's been closed. I mean, before you close, that everything has been done.
Right.
And so, oh my gosh. So then you show up at closing, and that's the fun part. You sign your name about 4 jillion times if you're getting a mortgage, or 5 or 10 times if you're paying cash.
Yeah.
So, you don't get a little writer's cramp kind of thing. And don't be taking your stamp with you, or your favorite pen, because, you need to check if your favorite pen has the right color ink, because you're going to have to be signing these in wet signatures. I'd like to hopefully we'll get to the day where you can just completely electronic signature all of it, and they can do it over Zoom and you don't have to go anywhere. That would be nice.
That would be amazing.
For finance transactions across the board. There are some kind of situations when you can do that, but not all the time. So, oh my gosh, have we missed anything? Now I'm like an overload here.
Oh, I know it's been so much fun going through this journey.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even, we haven't hit on every single thing, but I think we hit on the most important things, don't you?
Yeah, we've hit on the most important ones. Yeah, and that's right. There are, depending on the specific buyers and sellers and the specific house, there are other steps that can be in there.
Yeah, and it depends on the contract.
Yeah,
And, we're thinking right here about a residential contract, but um, it's really, I think, also important to know that not all of this is done on every transaction, because
right.
there's a bunch of differences in transactions. Now, all of this may be necessary, plus there may be a wide variety of other things that we have not covered. If you are in fact purchasing a property on the Gulf intercoastal waterways, or maybe purchasing a coastal property, then there's going to be
Mhm.
other documents you're going to have to take into in consideration, as well as measurements if you're buying something on the coast. Or a farm and ranch, there's going to be additional
Right.
considerations. A condominium as well, because the condominium, is going to be really, there's not going to be a survey and different kind of things that are thrown in there, and your agent should be able to run you through that. Or if they can't, we got a problem, you and I should talk. But even properties located near an international border, there are other things that you have to consider. And we're not going to cover those, but because those are on a case by case basis. But those are some of the things that you need to take into consideration, because there's going to be aspects that you're going to have to think about. And I think that using a realtor is going to be, your best bet. And hopefully you have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome to have a talented agent on your side to get you through everything we've just talked about and more.
Right. Thanks for watching and listening. Like, subscribe, and follow us in the future.